In one of the previous videos, we talked about guided reading, and we talked about different structures that you can use for guided reading. One of the structures that I focused on was the Daily 5. In this video, I'm going to give you some tips on how to implement the Daily 5 and help you figure out how you want to structure it for your classroom. The Daily 5 is not a program or a curriculum, to be very clear. It is a method to structure your classroom for differentiation. So let's start from the beginning. Why should we even differentiate? Differentiate means to change your instruction or the method of your instruction, the way that you teach, to better suit the needs of your student. What this does is allows your students to grow in their education and in their skills at a pace that works for them and make bigger strides as they do. Differentiation is difficult for teachers because you have to manage many students at one time while working with few in smaller groups. This can prove to be very challenging in a large classroom. While the Daily 5 is an excellent method to establish structure for differentiation in your class, meaning establish a structure where students can rotate from group to group on different tasks, the Daily 5 is not the only way for you to implement this. So take from the Daily 5 what works for you and your classroom and alter what does not. This way you can make it suitable and more workable for your classroom. The first step is to understand your curriculum and to map it out. So understand what subjects and topics you need to be teaching throughout the year and at what time. This way, when you meet your students, you'll be able to tell if certain students are ahead of where they need to be or behind where they need to be, and you can make your groups according to their levels. The second step would be to identify your goals. What are your goals for each group? So if I'm teaching reading, I might have one group of students, they're at a 4th grade level, while another group of students are at a 3rd grade level, and another group of students, they're at a 3rd grader in the middle of the school year. These would be my 3 different groups. And each group might be doing a different task during reading within that period and working on different assignments while I'm working one-on-one with one group at a time. Design your stations. The Daily 5, we'll go over this in the coming slides, but you want to design how each station will be structured and what your students will do at each station as they move about the class and how long they will spend in each area. So if I have one group of students doing word work and another group of students doing guided reading with me, a 3rd group of students working on comprehension questions, I will allocate about 20 minutes per station and rotate every 20 minutes or maybe 15 minutes, maybe allowing for a break in the middle. Do what works for your students. And the 4th step is to monitor progress. See how far your students have come, how far they have progressed. Are the strategies and the methods that you are using working? If not, change it up. Try something else. It's okay to change things as you go. That's what makes you an excellent educator, meeting the needs of your students in the way that they need you to. The most important thing about the Daily 5, and I call it the secret to success, is to make sure that you set clear expectations. The book of the Daily 5, the authors recommend that you implement one station at a time. So you teach your classroom one station and how it would work. Once they've mastered that, you introduce a 2nd station, and then you rotate between only 2 stations. Then you can go ahead and add a 3rd station, and once the students understand and comprehend how to work in that station, you would introduce the 3rd one and create your flow between 3 different stations or 4, however you want to structure it. But introduce one at a time. Make sure your students understand what they need to do. So for example, if I'm teaching a vocabulary, I have one station for vocabulary. All my students will understand what they need to do when they reach that station. Now, the content of that station might vary. The advanced group will get more difficult words. The less advanced group will get average words, and the students who are struggling will get less advanced words. But procedures and methods have to be very, very clear for students in order for you to differentiate in your classroom and for the Daily 5 structure to work. Here's an example of Daily 5 stations for an elementary classroom. These images and posters like this can be found on teacherspayteachers.com for very minimal prices. Sometimes some teachers even post things for free. If you look at the first one, it says read to self. This has to be taught on its own. For how does a student engage in reading by themselves? Model the correct way to do it and the incorrect way to do it. This is how I look when I'm reading to myself the correct way, which might be slouching, not paying attention, being distracted. Reading to self the correct way would mean to sit in a comfortable spot where you can sit steady for a while and be engaged with your book. Each one of the Daily 5 stations need to be taught and modeled the correct way and the incorrect way. Reading to someone. This is where a student can read to a partner or record on a device. Word work is vocabulary work. Work with words. Sentence diagramming. Looking up definitions. Conjugating words for different parts of speech. One of the other stations set up in the Daily 5 suggestions is listening to reading. This can be done where a student listens to reading on an audiobook and follows along in the text in front of them or follows along on a screen. The student can also be listening to someone else read, another adult in the room or another student, or a recording. Working on writing. This station is extremely important. Students should get daily writing in for reading classes to improve their reading skills and their writing skills. And this is an easy station to have students work independently and on their own. So you can have a writing prompt ready to go. You can have a method of editing where the child writes, drops it in the bin, teacher edits, drops it in another bin for the student to pick up. Or they can peer edit where they swap papers and they edit with each other. Remember, when students are paired at a similar level, it might not be as daunting for them to have another student see their work. These are just some ideas that you can implement. And then another station would be time with the teacher. So this is where you're actually sitting and having instruction with one group through guided reading or through instructional reading for your curriculum text. The possibilities can be numerous. Here's an example of a chart that a teacher uses for their classroom every day if the student knows what they're doing each day. So maybe realistically, the child won't be able to go through every station every day. So maybe on Tuesday they read to self and they do word work and they meet with the teacher. On Wednesday, they only do reading with the buddy, listening to reading, and they meet with the teacher. Each day it might vary from student to student and day to day. The struggling students should meet with the teacher as much as possible though. Okay, on the next slide, you'll see some activities you can do for each station. So for example, for word work, you can do vocabulary charts, sentence blocks, vocabulary activities, sentence blocks with words on them where kids can make sentences using the blocks and pairing them together. This is an excellent activity for students to do who are jittery, who need something more hands-on. And the blocks are according to their parts of speech. They're available at teacher stores or on Amazon. Another example would be writing written responses, writing about characters, synthesizing information in their writing journals. Keeping a consistent writing journal for your reading class would be really helpful for your students. Guided reading or mini lesson with the teacher. So maybe I can do a mini lesson on similes in the text that day. Instead of guided reading, maybe I might do guided reading, but that is that one-on-one time that group has with the teacher, and then reading with a partner. So there's different ways to read with a partner on Raz Kids, on guided readers, through text, recordings. We talked about these. That's one example. Another example would be the Daily 3. It's something that emerged after the Daily 5. So the Daily 5 was something that was structured and designed for reading. The Daily 3 came later on because it worked so well for reading. It was a structure that it was designed for math, but it was narrowed down to things that are more specific for math. So you can also find this on the Daily 5 resources. There's also a Daily 5 website where you can access more information. So you can, for example, the math exercises or the math stations look like independent work. Working with manipulatives is another station, mini lessons with the teacher. The Daily 3 work really well in math because a lot of times students only need about a 10-15 minutes of instruction, and then they need time to work on their problems and practice what they've been taught. So the rotating structures within the classroom works really well with the Daily 3 for math. So these are some ways that you can use differentiation using the Daily 5 and the Daily 3 in math and reading. But remember, you can modify it to work for you and cater it to your classroom so that it's more effective and specific to the needs of your students. Thank you.